The mysterious, potentially shark-related death of Michelle Von Emster in 1994 has continued to raise questions for almost 3 decades. Michelle was found floating deceased near Sunset Cliffs in San Diego, California. The coroner attributed this to a great white shark attack, which has since sparked considerable skepticism due to inconsistencies in the evidence and the nature of her injuries. Michelle had last been seen the night before her body was discovered, when she was dropped off near the pier by a friend after attending a concert. The next day, two surfers noticed a flock of seagulls near the water and discovered her body. At first, it seemed that a shark attack might explain her extensive injuries. Her leg was torn off, her ribs and neck were broken, and her body bore multiple lacerations. However, the autopsy revealed additional troubling details, which suggested that a shark may not have been the culprit. Sand was found in her mouth, throat, and stomach, suggesting she had been alive when submerged in the water. This detail contradicted the theory that she died instantly from a shark attack, as most agreed it would have been impossible for her to inhale sand after such an injury. The shark attack theory has been largely discredited by shark experts in the years following her discovery. One renowned shark specialist pointed out that the nature of the bone damage was inconsistent with a great white shark bite, which typically leaves clean incisions. Instead, Michelle's femur was jagged, twisted almost like a piece of bamboo whittled to a point. Furthermore, the absence of tooth fragments in her remains further discredited the shark theory. A number of chilling alternative theories have been proposed. One suggestion is that Michelle fell from the cliffs above, her injuries stemming from the fall and subsequent contact with the rocks. Yet, the extent of her injuries, especially her missing leg, remains unexplained by a simple fall, though it does explain how she may have ended up ingesting sand. Another theory claims that she drowned after being swept out to sea, possibly caught in a riptide, but this too fails to explain the extent of the damage to her body. Perhaps the most sinister theory is that Michelle was slain. She lived in a rough neighborhood, and some speculate that she may have had an encounter with a violent individual before her death. Michelle had previously mentioned to friends that she was being stalked by a man who rode a motorcycle, though this suspect was never identified. Another figure of suspicion was a local writer who had gone on a date with Michelle shortly before her death. His bizarre poem, written after her body was found, disturbingly alluded to the gruesome state she was found in, details that made many uneasy. However, all the details included in this poem were within the public domain, and the poem may have simply been in remarkably poor taste. The placement of Michelle's belongings also raises questions. Her purse was found 2 miles from her body, leading some to believe that it was deliberately planted there by someone trying to mislead investigators. Despite the overwhelming view from shark experts that Michelle was not the victim of a shark attack, her official COD continues to be listed as shark-related till this day. Unfortunately, because of this, there's no active, ongoing investigation into her case. The location of Jomsborg, a Viking stronghold mentioned in various sagas, remains a subject of ongoing debate among historians and archaeologists. Notably, whether Jomsborg actually existed, or whether it was a legendary location, remains the subject of debate as well, though most scholars believe it had at least some basis in reality. Jomsborg was said to be a fortress inhabited by the Jomsvikings, a group of warrior mercenaries active between the 10th and 11th centuries. The Jomsvikings were said to have been extremely dedicated to the service of the Old Norse gods. Think of them like the Knights of St. John, or the Teutonic Knights for Norse paganism. Yet despite this, their love of looting, pillaging, and adventure meant that they would contract themselves out, even to Christian rulers, who were combating the Viking menace. Several theories have been proposed regarding its exact whereabouts, with many scholars placing it on the southern coast of the Baltic Sea in what is now modern-day Poland. The most widely accepted theory identifies Jomsborg with the town of Wolin, situated on the island of the same name. This island is located at the mouth of the Oder River, close to the Baltic Sea. Wolin was an important trading center during the Viking Age, and its strategic location made it a plausible candidate for the fortress described in the sagas. Archaeological evidence from the area has revealed extensive remnants of a fortified settlement dating from the 10th century. This evidence includes charred ramparts and a wooden pier, suggesting the presence of a military stronghold and a trading post, characteristics frequently attributed to Jomsborg. The saga accounts of Jomsborg also create some confusion regarding its location. Early medieval chroniclers referred to the region as Vendland, complicating efforts to pinpoint the fortress's exact spot. In some texts, the fortress is conflated with the broader geographical region known as Jom, adding to the ambiguity. Despite this, the consensus among many scholars is that Wolin was the most probable location for Jomsborg, if it existed. Some alternative theories propose that Jomsborg could have been situated further east in the Baltic region. However, these ideas have garnered less support due to a lack of convincing archaeological evidence. Branson Perry's mysterious disappearance in April 2001 continues to puzzle investigators and the public. At 20 years old, Branson vanished from his hometown of Skidmore, Missouri, a town notorious for its history of strange and violent events. To anyone who is familiar with true crime, you may recognize the name of the town as the place where the community slew their town bully Ken McElroy in broad daylight in 1981. If you're not familiar with that case, I'll be discussing it later on in this episode, so be sure to stay tuned, because it's as unusual as it sounds. On the day he disappeared, Branson was helping a friend, Jenna Crawford, clean his father's house, while his father was hospitalized. Two mechanics were outside working on his father's car. At some point, Branson mentioned he was going to return some jumper cables to a shed and left the house. He was never seen again. Initially, investigators had little to go on. They interviewed Branson's acquaintances, including Crawford and the mechanics. However, the lack of clear evidence put a stop to their efforts. In the months and years that followed, various theories emerged. Some believed Branson's disappearance was drug-related. It was suggested that he may have owed money to local drug dealers or had knowledge of illegal activities that put him in danger. Though these leads were explored, they ultimately led nowhere. The investigation took a darker turn in 2003 when a man named Jack Wayne Rogers was arrested in connection to unrelated crimes involving unspeakable acts and unlicensed medical procedures. Rogers, a former minister and Boy Scout leader, became a person of interest in Branson's case after authorities found disturbing online posts after his arrest. In these posts, Rogers described the abduction, torture, and slaying of a young blonde male hitchhiker, circumstances that eerily matched Branson's disappearance. Additionally, a turtle claw necklace similar to one owned by Branson was found in Rogers' possession. Despite these clues, Rogers denied involvement, and no further direct evidence tied him to the crime. Ultimately, Rogers was never charged with anything to do with Branson's disappearance, with the consensus being that he had made up the posts to win clout with online sickos. In 2022, Nodaway County Sheriff Randy Strong announced that a suspect had been identified, though more evidence was required before an arrest could be made. Notably, despite the passage of time since this announcement, there doesn't appear to be any further developments in the case. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Branson Perry, I would encourage you to reach out to the Nottoway County Sheriff's Office with details. The Chattahoochee River, a vital waterway running through Georgia, has become the unsettling backdrop for a bizarre and disturbing mystery, the appearance of headless goats. Since at least 2018, hundreds of decapitated goats have been found floating in the river, primarily near bridges like the one along Interstate 20. Despite numerous investigations and widespread media coverage, no one has definitively identified who is behind the dumpings or why they're happening. One of the prevailing explanations ties the headless goats to Santeria, a syncretic religion blending African and Catholic practices, which includes animal sacrifice as part of its rituals. Followers of Santeria often sacrifice goats and chickens to honor their deities, or orishas, believing that the life force within these animals carries potent spiritual energy. This could explain why the goats are found floating in the Chattahoochee, but it doesn't address why the decapitations are happening in such high numbers. Further experts familiar with Santeria note that after the sacrificing event, the animal is generally consumed rather than discarded. However, that said, it does appear that there are certain rituals associated with the religion which require an animal carcass to be put in a river. However, not all experts are convinced that Santeria tells the full story, and that there may be an organized crime element to the activity. The Chattahoochee's proximity to Atlanta, a known hub for substance trafficking, has sparked speculation that these animal sacrifices might be connected to the criminal underworld. It's been suggested that cartel members or other criminals may be performing sacrifices for protection or success. This may explain the particular high volume of headless goats in the Chattahoochee when compared with other regions with a significant amount of Santeria practitioners. Also, just to take a moment to reflect here, that's definitely a line I never thought I'd be delivering in my life. Still others have suggested that the sacrifices could be connected to satanic animal sacrifice rituals. Despite the occult and criminal theories, other more mundane explanations haven't been entirely ruled out. Illegal dumping in the Chattahoochee isn't limited to goats. Tires, old electronics, and other refuse regularly turns up in the water. Some speculate that the goat carcasses could be the byproduct of an unlicensed slaughterhouse or farm, though no definitive proof has emerged to support this. Further, those who are skeptical of the unlicensed slaughterhouse theory question why the rest of the animal wasn't used and why other animals don't turn up in the river in the same way. Luis Armando Albino's abduction case is one of the most extraordinary missing person stories in modern American history, and by the end of this segment you'll realize that's not hyperbole. In 1951, Albino was just 6 years old when he was lured away from Jefferson Square Park in Oakland, California, by a woman who promised him candy. His older brother, Roger, was playing with him at the time, but when Roger momentarily turned his back, Luis vanished. The woman took him across the country to the East Coast, where he was raised by another family as their own child, leaving his biological family devastated and desperate for answers. Albino's family, originally from Puerto Rico, had only recently moved to the U.S., and his mother, Antonia, never stopped searching for him. She clung to the hope that her son was still alive, frequently visiting the Oakland police station, even well into her old age. Sadly, she died in 2005, never knowing what had become of her son. Her family noted that she prayed for Luis every single day of her life, and would never accept the notion or possibility that Luis may be deceased. Her persistence, though, would eventually be rewarded, just not in her lifetime. The discovery of Albino's whereabouts came in 2024, more than 7 decades after his disappearance, thanks to modern DNA technology. His niece, Alida Aliquin, had grown up with stories about her missing uncle. Antonia had kept newspaper clippings and photos of Albino throughout her life, passing down her hope to future generations so they could continue the search. In 2020, Alita submitted her DNA to an ancestry site for fun, only to discover a surprising 22% match with a man living on the East Coast. Initially, she wasn't able to connect with him, but her determination led her to reopen the case with the Oakland police. Her investigative efforts, aided by DNA results, old photographs, and newspaper clippings, led to the reopening of the missing persons case by authorities. Eventually, in June 2024, Albino was found alive, living as a retired Marine Corps veteran and firefighter with his own family. He had no idea he was missing, let alone the subject of a 73-year-long search. Luis was reunited with his biological family in Oakland just 4 days after his discovery. He reconnected with his older brother Roger for the first time since that fateful day in 1951. The reunion was emotional, especially for Roger, who passed away shortly after seeing his brother again. Albino's reappearance provided closure to his family, particularly to Alita, who felt vindicated for her determination to take up Antonia's desire to solve the mystery. The details of the kidnapping are still unknown, and the FBI continues to investigate how and why this event occurred and who was involved. Lake Baikal, located in Siberia, is the world's deepest and oldest freshwater lake, home to the Baikal seal, the only freshwater seal species on Earth. The existence of these seals in such an isolated body of water, far from the ocean, and perched 1,500 feet above sea level, is an ongoing mystery. How did these marine animals find themselves landlocked in a freshwater environment, and how have they adapted to thrive there? Experts believe the seals likely made their way into the lake millions of years ago, possibly during an era when the lake was connected to the Arctic Ocean through a system of rivers. However, the exact pathway remains unclear. One prevailing theory links their arrival to a now defunct river system that once connected Lake Baikal to the Arctic through Siberia. Genetic studies show similarities between Baikal seals and Arctic ringed seals, indicating a shared ancestry. These studies have also been useful in attempting to figure out just how long the seals have been in Lake Baikal, with current estimates being about 2 million years. Their eventual isolation in Baikal due to geological changes allowed them to evolve into a distinct species adapted to the lake's unique ecosystem. Baikal seals rely on a steady diet of golemyanka, a small translucent fish that forms the bulk of their diet. Notably, the only significant natural threats to adult Baikal seals are brown bears, although such encounters are rare as the bears prefer easier prey. But yeah, the trade-off is being forced to eat an unappetizing fish called a golemyanka for every meal for the past 2 million years. So I question whether this was a good trade-off. The seals' success, however, hasn't shielded them from man-made challenges. For one, they face periodic epidemics, some linked to pollutants like DDT and industrial waste from nearby factories. In the 1980s, this problem became so severe that it led to weakened immune systems, which in turn led to opportunistic infections decimating the population. However, stricter regulations and an attempt to preserve Lake Baikal and the seals eventually led to the seal population rebounding. Poaching and accidental deaths in fishing nets also contribute to the loss of seals each year. Despite legal protections and efforts to reduce hunting quotas, a significant number of seals still die annually. Pollution and industrialization around Lake Baikal continue to pose long-term threats, and climate change is increasingly seen as a potential disruptor of the lake's delicate ecosystem. Ken McElroy's death on July 10, 1981, in the small town of Skidmore, Missouri, remains one of the most notorious instances of vigilante justice in modern American history. Known as a violent bully, McElroy had terrorized the town for over 2 decades, committing a series of crimes ranging from theft and arson to aggravated assault, and much, much worse. Given the platform we're on, I can't go too deep into the specifics on his crimes, but let's just say his offenses included the absolute worst things one could ever be accused of. Despite being charged with numerous felonies, his lawyer estimated as many as 3 a year. He consistently evaded significant jail time by intimidating witnesses and manipulating the legal system. McElroy's ability to avoid punishment created a palpable sense of fear among the residents of Skidmore. Law enforcement, undermanned and often reluctant to confront McElroy, was largely ineffective in curbing his reign of terror. The climax of his criminal activities came in 1980 when McElroy shot Bo Bowenkamp, a local grocer, in the neck over a trivial dispute about candy allegedly stolen by McElroy's child. Also, I suppose this was a sort of take your kid to work day activity for McElroy and Jr. Steal some candy and then light up the shopkeeper. Although Bowenkamp survived, McElroy was released on bond after his conviction for assault, and he brazenly continued to harass the town, even threatening Bowenkamp while out on appeal. On the morning of his death, McElroy was sitting in his pickup truck outside the D&G Tavern after having a drink. No word on whether he was legal to drive at the time, but given that local law enforcement was too scared of him to confront him, I guess anything goes in Skidmore. A group of townspeople gathered nearby, discussing what could be done about their longtime tormentor. As McElroy sat in his truck, several shots rang out. He was struck by bullets from 2 different firearms, yet despite the presence of up to 46 witnesses, including his wife, none of the bystanders would identify the shooters. The slaying took place in broad daylight, and McElroy's wife, who had been sitting beside him, was the only person to name a possible shooter, though her accusation never led to charges. In fact, despite multiple investigations by local law enforcement and the FBI, no one has ever been held accountable for McElroy's killing. This silence is often interpreted as a collective decision by the townspeople, who believe that McElroy's death was a necessary and overdue form of justice. Also, this is the part where I would usually say some lines about how you can reach out to law enforcement with tips. And I'm not about to tell you not to go report details of a crime or anything. But let's just say you can go look up the details on where to report any evidence associated with the slaying of Ken McElroy on your own time. The Cambrian explosion, occurring around 540 million years ago, represents a critical juncture in the history of life on Earth. This relatively brief geological period witnessed an unprecedented diversification of multicellular organisms, leading to the emergence of most major animal phyla present today. The sudden appearance of complex life forms in the fossil record has intrigued scientists, prompting extensive research into the underlying causes of this evolutionary milestone. One prominent hypothesis attributes the Cambrian explosion to a significant rise in atmospheric and oceanic oxygen levels. Oxygen plays a crucial role in metabolic processes, particularly in the energy-intensive activities of larger and more complex organisms. Geological evidence suggests that prior to the Cambrian period, oxygen levels were considerably lower, limiting the size and complexity of life forms. The oxygen threshold hypothesis posits that a tipping point was reached when oxygen concentrations increased sufficiently to support aerobic respiration in larger organisms. This rise in oxygen may have been driven by increased photosynthetic activity from cyanobacteria and early algae. This is thought to have led to changes in ocean chemistry and promoting the evolution of more complex life. The evolution of predation is another critical factor proposed to explain the rapid diversification during the Cambrian period. The emergence of the first effective predators would have fundamentally altered ecological dynamics, initiating an evolutionary arms race. Prey species would evolve defensive adaptations, such as hard shells and spines, while predators developed more effective hunting strategies. This coevolutionary process could have accelerated morphological diversification and complexity. Fossil evidence supports this notion, with the appearance of mineralized skeletons and defensive structures coinciding with the Cambrian explosion. The light switch hypothesis highlights the evolution of more complex visual systems as a catalyst for the Cambrian explosion. The development of eyes would have dramatically enhanced the interactions between organisms, facilitating more sophisticated behaviors like active hunting and evasion. Improved vision could have increased the selective pressures on both predators and prey, promoting rapid diversification. Environmental changes, including shifts in climate, sea levels, and ocean chemistry, created new habitats and ecological opportunities. Others speculate that the breakup of the supercontinent Rodinia altered global geography, influencing ocean currents and nutrient distribution. Ecological feedback mechanisms offer another layer of explanation. As new species evolved, they interacted with one another, creating complex ecosystems with intricate food webs. These interactions would have generated new selective pressures and opportunities for diversification. The increasing complexity of ecological relationships could have driven further evolutionary changes, reinforcing the rapid pace of diversification. The role of mass extinction events preceding the Cambrian explosion has also been considered extensively. The snowball Earth hypothesis suggests that global glaciations during the late Proterozoic era drastically reduced biodiversity. The subsequent melting and warming periods could have provided a burst of ecological opportunities for surviving organisms, leading to rapid evolutionary radiation. Some researchers propose that the Cambrian explosion reflects, in part, an artifact of the fossil record. Before the Cambrian period, many organisms lacked hard parts that fossilize readily, leading to a sparse fossil record. The advent of biomineralization increased the likelihood of preservation, making it appear as though life diversified suddenly. While this explains some aspects of the fossil record, it does not fully account for molecular and developmental evidence indicating a genuine increase in diversity. At present, it appears likely that the Cambrian explosion is likely the result of many factors, and we simply don't possess enough evidence at present to know which factors to give what weight to. The Redbird River petroglyphs located in Manchester, Kentucky, are among the state's most intriguing and debated historical artifacts. Carved into a 50-ton sandstone boulder, these petroglyphs have sparked countless theories regarding their origins, with some suggesting they contain inscriptions in up to 8 Old World languages. These include Ancient Greek, Hebrew, Phoenician, and even Norse, which some claim point to pre-Columbian contact between European civilizations and the Americas by Vikings. Despite these claims, no definitive translation or scholarly consensus has been reached regarding the exact meanings of these carvings. The stone itself originally rested on a cliff above the Redbird River before it fell onto Kentucky Route 66 in 1994. Due to its significance, the stone was relocated to Rawlings Stinson Park, where it now sits under a protective shelter. The markings cover much of the stone's face, with proponents of the Old World theory arguing that the carvings represent evidence of ancient transoceanic visits to North America. They claim these inscriptions are proof of contact long before Columbus, dating back as early as the 9th century BC, with links to the Mediterranean and North African cultures. However, many mainstream archaeologists and historians dispute these interpretations. They suggest a more localized explanation, arguing that the carvings are likely the work of Native Americans, possibly the Cherokee, who lived in the region for centuries. Some scholars have posited that the petroglyphs could be the result of colonial era settlers experimenting with ancient languages they had studied. It wasn't uncommon for learned individuals of the colonial period to have knowledge of Greek, Hebrew, or other ancient scripts, and they may have left these carvings during their time in Kentucky. The petroglyphs have also been associated with local Cherokee myths. Some legends link the carvings to a Cherokee chief named Redbird, who supposedly had a connection to the stone. The carvings could have been a form of communication or storytelling, but without a clear method of interpreting these symbols, much of this remains speculative. The concept of the Pure Land in Buddhism represents a realm of bliss and enlightenment, free from the suffering of the mortal world. Central to Pure Land Buddhism, it revolves around the devotion to Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light. Followers believe that by sincerely invoking Amitabha's name, they can be reborn in the Western Pure Land, known as Sukhavati, where attaining enlightenment becomes much easier. Pure Land Buddhism emerged in India, but gained significant prominence in East Asia, particularly in China during the Tang Dynasty. It provided a more accessible path to salvation for laypeople who found traditional Buddhist practices challenging. The emphasis shifted from rigorous meditation and monastic discipline to faith and devotion, making it popular among all social classes. According to Pure Land Buddhists, Amitabha promised that anyone who calls upon his name with genuine faith would be welcomed into his Pure Land after death. This practice, known as Nianfo in Chinese and Nembutsu in Japanese, involves the repetitive chanting of Amitabha's name. It's seen not just as a devotional act, but as a meditative practice that focuses the mind and cultivates inner purity. In Japan, Pure Land Buddhism evolved into distinct schools like Jodo Shu and Jodo Shinshu, founded by the monks Honen and Shinran, respectively. They taught that reliance on one's own efforts was insufficient for salvation in these degenerate times, known as Mappo. Instead, absolute trust in Amitabha's vow was essential, as any form of enlightenment was simply impossible, given the evils of the material world. The Pure Land itself is described as a place adorned with jeweled trees, fragrant blossoms, and celestial music, a realm where beings are free from ignorance and karmic hindrances. Time in the Pure Land is said to be perceived differently. Without the pressures of worldly existence, practitioners can dedicate themselves entirely to understanding Dharma. Pure Land Buddhists believe that their faith in the hereafter also improves the material world around them as well, despite believing in the impurity of the world. Pure Land practitioners argue that sincere faith naturally leads to ethical living and compassion, aligning with core Buddhist principles. Further, Pure Land proponents argue that it offers a practical means for those unable to pursue monastic life. The Mandela effect surrounding Queen's classic "We Are the Champions" has left many listeners confused about how the song actually ends. A large number of people swear the studio version concludes with the iconic line "of the world," yet, when they listen to it again, that final phrase is missing. This discrepancy is what fuels the Mandela effect, a phenomenon where a group of people remember something differently from how it actually occurred. In reality, the studio version of "We Are the Champions" does not end with "of the world." It simply finishes on the line, "We are the champions." This has left countless fans puzzled because their memory insists that Freddie Mercury belts out "of the world" as the final statement of the song. The confusion is often attributed to live performances, such as Queen's famous Live Aid performance in 1985, where Mercury does indeed finish the song with that extended phrase. Over time, the live rendition seems to have blended with people's recollections of the studio recording, creating this widespread but incorrect memory. That said, I could have sworn that the studio version of this song included Of the World at the end of the song, and to the best of my knowledge, I've never listened to the Live Aid version. Anyway, I did some more digging on this one, and I was able to find a live performance of We Are the Champions, recorded in Budapest in 1986. This version also ends the song with Freddie Mercury belting out the line, which suggests to me that this had unofficially been integrated into the song during live performances. Through the millions of people who saw them live, plus the tens of millions more who have listened to recordings of the live performance, I think this Mandela effect is fully explained. Liminal spaces are the physical embodiment of transition, a threshold between two states of being. These spaces are often characterized by their emptiness, neglect, or disuse. They can be as mundane as a deserted hallway, a vacant parking lot at dusk, or an empty airport terminal at midnight. Despite their ordinary settings, these spaces evoke a profound sense of unease and horror in many people, so much so that liminal horror has become its own genre. The question arises, why do such commonplace environments instill fear? One theory suggests that the discomfort stems from the uncanny nature of liminal spaces. The uncanny valley, a concept originally associated with robotics and animation, describes a point at which something appears almost human, but has subtle deviations that cause discomfort. Similarly, liminal spaces are familiar, yet distorted versions of places we know. A school hallway is familiar during the day when bustling with students, but at night, its emptiness transforms it into something unsettling. The familiarity combined with an absence of expected elements creates a cognitive dissonance that unsettles the mind. Evolutionary psychology offers another interesting perspective on this mystery. Humans have evolved to be alert to signs of danger in their environment. Empty or abandoned places could signify the presence of threats or a lack of resources. In prehistoric times, a silent forest might have indicated the presence of predators, prompting a fight or flight response. This ingrained instinct may carry over to modern settings, causing unease in empty urban environments where we expect activity. The concept of psychological liminality may also play a role. Liminality refers to a state of transition between one stage and another. In life, transitional periods often bring about feelings of uncertainty and anxiety. Liminal spaces physically represent this state of flux. Being in such a space can trigger subconscious associations with personal transitions, amplifying feelings of vulnerability and fear. Of course, modern cultural influences cannot be easily ignored. In the last number of years, creepypastas, horror YouTube channels, and video games have frequently used liminal spaces as settings for unsettling events. Even in more traditional media settings like movies and television, abandoned hospitals, empty streets, and deserted houses are common backdrops for horror narratives. This repeated exposure conditions people to associate such environments with fear and danger. This cultural conditioning reinforces the innate discomfort these spaces evoke, creating a positive feedback loop of negative emotions associated with liminal spaces. The absence of human presence is another factor contributing to the horror of liminal spaces. The vast majority of people, even the most introverted amongst us, are inherently social creatures. The lack of other people in a setting where social interaction is expected creates a sense of deep isolation. This isolation can lead to feelings of vulnerability and fear, as there is no one to provide assistance or comfort in case of a threat. This also potentially explains why uninhabited spaces, which we expect to be uninhabited, like a pond in the woods on a sunny day, evoke a sense of warmth rather than fear. Another theory revolves around the disruption of time perception. Liminal spaces often feel disconnected from the normal flow of time. An empty airport terminal late at night might feel timeless, as if existing outside of regular schedules and routines. This temporal dislocation can disorient in the human mind, again leading to feelings of unease. The aesthetic qualities of liminal spaces also contribute to their unsettling nature. Harsh lighting, stark architecture, and repetitive patterns can overwhelm the senses. These environmental factors can induce sensory discomfort, which translates into psychological unease. The warrigal, a cryptid of Australian folklore, is often described as a large, muscular, cat-like predator that roams the remote regions of New South Wales, particularly the Blue Mountains. With a physique resembling a lion, these creatures are said to have distinctive dark fur, sometimes black or burnt orange, and large teeth reminiscent of a saber-toothed cat. Notably, this big cat is said to possess a mane unlike other Australian big cat cryptids, like the Queensland tiger or the Blue Mountains panther. While its description often aligns with that of big cats, some speculate it could be a relic of prehistoric species like the thylacoleo or marsupial lion, which once roamed the Australian landscape. However, there's no solid evidence that connects the two species directly. Eyewitness accounts of the warrigal stretch back over a century. In 1889, the first recorded sighting occurred in Megalong Valley, where it allegedly ate livestock. This behavior continued into the 20th century, with sightings often coinciding with reports of slain farm animals. In 1945, a group claimed to have spotted 4 of these creatures in Cedar Valley, marking one of the most detailed sightings of that period. However, this sighting was made through binoculars, which has led some to challenge the details of the description. In 1972, a spate of sheep slayings in the area revived the myth when locals reported a creature with lion-like features roaming the area. Interestingly, Aboriginal folklore may be the source of these tales, as lion and tiger-like animals have been present in indigenous stories long before European settlers arrived. This has led some researchers to argue that the creature is not just a feral or escaped big cat, but a unique species possibly linked to marsupial predators that diverged from traditional carnivores. Modern sightings of the warrigal remain sporadic but persistent, with the last major account coming from 2001. 2 hikers described seeing a black, cat-like creature eating a wallaby from a perch in a tree. Notably, despite the numerous sightings of the creature over the course of well over a century, there's never been a photograph taken of it. Mainstream scientists typically dismiss the warrigal as a myth or a case of mistaken identity, pointing to known species like dingoes or feral big cats. Cryptozoologists assert that there's the potential that the creature represents either a quote-unquote living fossil like the marsupial lion, or a species that has flown under the radar of mainstream science. I find the warrigal fascinating within the broader context of the alien big cat phenomenon. Like other reported ABCs, the warrigal is described as a large, exotic feline in a region where such animals shouldn't exist, raising a ton of questions about its origins. The persistence of warrigal sightings over centuries also mirrors the ABC phenomenon, where anecdotal evidence and sporadic reports keep the mystery alive despite scant evidence. For this reason, I suspect that there may be some truth to this creature, even if it isn't a typical cryptid, so to speak. As I'm recording this, I'm reminded of that one case of a mountain lion that was found in Scotland in the 1980s after years and years of reporting by locals and dismissive responses by officials. Also, big shout out to Orklord Dave for another excellent and obscure cryptid suggestion. If you have any suggestions to make, feel free to leave them in the comments below or join up on the Discord and leave your suggestions there. The Phantom Sniper of Camden terrorized the city of Camden, New Jersey, over a short period in late 1927 and early 1928. Throughout this strange saga, a shadowy figure targeted buses, homes, and automobiles, shattering windows and causing widespread panic, yet no clear motive or identity was ever discovered. The sniper's reign of terror began quietly, with incidents initially dismissed as random acts of vandalism. However, as the attacks increased in frequency and boldness, fear gripped the city. The sniper would often shoot at moving targets like buses or parked cars, typically under the cover of darkness, leaving shattered glass and terrified residents in his wake. At the height of the sniper's activity, nearly 50 attacks were attributed to this unknown assailant. One of the most perplexing elements of the Phantom Sniper's attacks was the elusive nature of the projectiles used. Though some victims reported hearing shots fired, authorities often found no bullets at the scene. In some cases, the objects that caused the damage were later identified as marbles or small pellets, adding to the surreal nature of the crime. One notable victim, a police officer, was struck in the back by what was initially believed to be a bullet, but was later revealed to be a marble. This strange detail led some to question whether the attacks were the work of a highly skilled quote-unquote prankster. One of the most significant attacks during the spree occurred when former state senator Albert S. Woodruff became one of the sniper's targets. Though uninjured, his involvement added political pressure to the search for the assailant. Despite this ramping up of the investigations, the sniper was never apprehended, and the attacks stopped as mysteriously as they began. Eyewitness reports were scant, but some described seeing a tall man fleeing from one of the scenes. In one chilling instance, a witness claimed to hear a man laughing before disappearing into the night, adding an eerie layer to the unfolding mystery. These sightings, however, never led to any substantial leads, and the case eventually faded from public attention. The theory that the Phantom Sniper of Camden may have been a case of mass hysteria gained traction due to the strange and elusive nature of the events. Despite numerous reported attacks and widespread panic, physical evidence was often lacking. In many cases, no bullets were found at the scenes, and some of the so-called projectiles found at the scene of the attacks may have simply been debris in the area. The media frenzy, coupled with fear and uncertainty, could have contributed to the escalation of unverified reports. Mass hysteria, or collective delusion, has been known to occur in situations of heightened anxiety, where imagined threats are perceived as real. This theory suggests that the public's growing fear created a feedback loop, amplifying normal events into terrifying encounters attributed to an unseen assailant. Although it can't fully explain the shattered windows and injuries, the idea of mass hysteria provides one possible lens to interpret the Camden Sniper mystery. Some speculate that the Phantom Sniper may have had a supernatural origin, given the mysterious and elusive nature of the attacks. Witnesses described eerie phenomena, such as hearing ghostly laughter or seeing a shadowy figure vanish after incidents. The lack of clear evidence, including the absence of bullets in many cases, fueled ideas that the sniper could be a ghost or some other worldly entity. Law enforcement agencies have increasingly turned to honeypots as a potent tool in cybercrime prevention and detection. A honeypot, in essence, is a deliberately vulnerable digital decoy designed to lure cybercriminals, allowing authorities to observe, analyze, and collect intelligence on their behavior. The core strategy behind honeypots involves deception and surveillance. The FBI's use of honeypots has gained significant attention due to several high-profile operations. One notable recent example is Operation Trojan Shield, which saw the FBI and Australian police distributing encrypted smartphones equipped with a specially designed honeypot app called Anom. Criminal organizations across the globe adopted this app under the belief that their communications were secure, while law enforcement agencies secretly monitored all activities. This operation led to over 800 arrests, showcasing the effectiveness of honeypots in dismantling organized crime networks. By pretending to offer a secure communication platform, authorities intercepted a wide range of illegal activities, from substance trafficking to money laundering. Also, some of the transcripts of the texts sent through the app are available to the public, and it's somewhat bizarre how open and brazen the criminals were in using the app. I always imagined that people involved in organized crime would be highly paranoid, leading to the use of heavily coded language, but apparently not. Other honeypots are set up to attract hackers wishing to infiltrate systems and engage in activities like cyber espionage. These operations exist not solely to catch individuals or shut down organizations, but to develop intelligence on strategies used by hackers. These tools have become particularly useful in seeking to mitigate cyber threats by diverting hackers away from genuine targets and providing critical insights into criminal tactics. Law enforcement agencies set up these traps to mimic legitimate systems or services that cybercriminals would find attractive. Whether it's a vulnerable file sharing system, an ostensibly secure messaging platform, or a fake banking portal, the goal is to entice hackers into engaging with the decoy. Once an attacker begins interacting with the system, law enforcement can track their activities, collect forensic evidence, and often identify the individuals involved. Modern honeypots are highly sophisticated, offering varying levels of interaction to study different types of attacks. High interaction honeypots, for example, simulate real systems in such detail that attackers believe they have breached a legitimate network, giving investigators deeper insights into their methodologies. However, the use of honeypots also raises legal and ethical concerns. One of the primary issues is the fine line between legitimate surveillance and entrapment. Entrapment occurs when law enforcement induces an individual to commit a crime they would not have otherwise considered, which could compromise the legality of the operation. To mitigate this, agencies attempt to ensure that honeypots are only used to catch criminals who are already predisposed to engaging in illegal activities. For instance, an individual seeking to hack into a banking system or purchase substances would already have criminal intent before interacting with a honeypot. Another challenge with honeypots lies in the risk of compromise. If cybercriminals detect that they are interacting with a decoy system, they may use it against law enforcement by planting false information or leveraging information to gain access to real systems. Further, law enforcement often co-opts legitimate online criminal operations and turns them into a honeypot, sometimes forcing cooperation from the original criminals running the operation. Hypnosis has fascinated people for centuries, evolving from mystical practices to a recognized therapeutic technique today. It's generally accepted as a phenomenon where a person experiences heightened suggestibility, relaxation, and focused attention. The origins of hypnosis can be traced back to ancient civilizations like Egypt, Greece, and China, where trance-like states were used in healing rituals. The sleep temples of Egypt were places where priests induced sleep or trance states to promote healing and receive divine messages. In Greece, the Temple of Epidaurus served a similar purpose, where patients underwent incubation to receive cures from the god Asclepius. Shamanic traditions worldwide also utilize trance states for healing and spiritual purposes, with some arguing that these states represent hypnosis or self-hypnosis. These early practices laid the groundwork for understanding altered states of consciousness, even if they weren't labeled as hypnosis at the time. In the 18th century, Franz Anton Mesmer, an Austrian physician, introduced the concept of animal magnetism. Mesmer believed that an invisible natural force flowed through all living things and could be manipulated to heal illnesses. His methods involved passing magnets or his hands over patients to redistribute this force, leading to trance like states and reportedly miraculous cures. His surname is also indelibly associated with hypnotism through the now outdated term mesmerism and the still widely used synonym for hypnotize, mesmerize. Mesmer's practices gained significant popularity, but were also met with equal and opposite skepticism. In 1784, a commission appointed by King Louis XVI, which included Benjamin Franklin, investigated Mesmer's claims. They concluded that the effects were due to imagination and suggestion rather than any magnetic force. Despite this supposed debunking of the phenomenon, Mesmer's work laid important foundations for the development of hypnotism. James Braid, a Scottish surgeon, is credited with coining the term hypnotism in the 1840s. After witnessing demonstrations of mesmerism, Braid theorized that the phenomena were psychological rather than magnetic, confirming the studies done by Ben Franklin. He observed that focused attention and eye fixation could induce a trance state, which he termed neurohypnotism or nervous sleep. Braid's work shifted the focus from Mesmer's mystical explanations to a more scientific understanding based on suggestion and concentration. Braid experimented with hypnosis for pain control during surgery, predating the widespread use of chemical anesthesia. While his findings were not widely adopted at the time, they influenced other medical professionals to explore hypnosis as a tool in clinical settings. Other physicians and psychologists continued to work with the ideas of Braid and Mesmer over the course of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Sigmund Freud initially used hypnosis in his clinical practice to explore the unconscious mind. He found that hypnosis could bring repressed memories and emotions to the surface, aiding in the treatment of neuroses. However, Freud eventually abandoned hypnosis in favor of free association and dream analysis. He believed these methods provided deeper access to the unconscious without the limitations he perceived in hypnosis, such as the potential for false memories. In the 20th century, Milton H. Erickson, an American psychiatrist, revolutionized hypnosis by introducing indirect suggestion and storytelling techniques. He believed that the unconscious mind could be accessed through metaphor and anecdote, facilitating therapeutic change without direct commands. Today, hypnosis is used in various medical and psychological treatments. Clinical hypnotherapy assists with pain management, anxiety reduction, smoking cessation, and treating phobias. Also, by way of credit to Dr. Braid, modern science has shown hypnosis reduces the need for anesthesia during surgical procedures and to alleviate chronic pain conditions. The cave cow is a cryptid believed to inhabit the cave systems of Central America, particularly in the Yucatan Peninsula and Belize. Also, just a quick humorous programming note. As I was editing this, I realized I called the cave cow an encryptid, which sounds perfect for a cryptid that's basically stuck in a cave. This creature is often described by locals as a large, hair-covered animal with sloth-like features, typically measuring between 10 and 12 feet in length. It is said to dwell deep in caves, emerging only at night to feed on vegetation and small animals. The rarity of sightings, combined with the cave cow's secluded habitat, contributes to the mystery surrounding it. Though the creature has a very distinctive name, the cave cow doesn't appear to me to have any particular bovid qualities whatsoever. Some suggest that the cave cow may be a large ground sloth, perhaps the descendant of a prehistoric giant sloth that fled to the cave systems. Some suggest that its lineage might trace back to an ancient, undiscovered species, possibly a surviving remnant of prehistoric creatures that have adapted to life underground. This theory finds support in the Yucatan's vast and largely unexplored cave systems, which could easily conceal such an elusive animal. The Mayan culture, which has long dominated the region, includes references to cave-dwelling animals in its mythology, though it is unclear if the cave cow is explicitly mentioned in ancient texts. The creature's supposed nocturnal nature is a key reason why it remains largely unseen. Most reported encounters happen during night or very early morning, when the creature is believed to leave its cave in search of food. Its diet is said to consist mainly of vegetation, though some accounts suggest it may also prey on small animals. Personally, I think the real mystery with the cave cow may not be whether the animal exists, but rather why such a creature was named the cave cow. Seriously, in what way is a giant cave-dwelling sloth cryptid in any way related to cows? The Testament of Solomon is a work traditionally attributed to King Solomon, renowned in biblical tradition for his wisdom and for constructing the first temple in Jerusalem. Likely composed between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD, it holds significant value in demonology. This work details Solomon's interactions with various demons, whom he binds and then compels to assist him in building the temple. The narrative begins with Solomon receiving a magical ring from the archangel Michael, granted by God, empowering him to command demons. This ring, inscribed with the seal of Solomon, is central to his control over demonic entities. The text proceeds to catalog the demons summoned by Solomon, each possessing unique characteristics, origins, and the afflictions they impose upon humans. A primary role of the Testament in demonology is its comprehensive classification of demons. These entities are portrayed with intricate personalities and specific domains of influence. The Testament of Solomon integrates elements of Greek and Near Eastern mythology, reflecting a mixture of cultural and religious beliefs. For instance, the inclusion of figures like Ephippas, a wind demon from Arabian lore, and Obi-Zuth, who is based on Medusa, reflects a blending of different demonological traditions. In addition to cataloging demons, the Testament offers insights into methods of exorcism and protection against demonic influences. Solomon's interactions with demons often culminate in the demons revealing the angels or rituals that can thwart them, providing practical guidance for readers. This aspect underscores the text's function not only as a narrative, but also as a manual for combating supposed demonic afflictions. The Testament of Solomon significantly influenced later magical practices, with Solomon often being credited as the first human to truly bring these dark forces under control. Its themes and demon classifications appear in grimoires and occult texts throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. The concept of commanding demons through divine authority or magical means became a recurring motif in Western esoteric traditions that continues until this day. The Seal of Solomon itself evolved into a prominent symbol in magical iconography, representing the power to bind and control spiritual entities. In modern magical contexts, the Testament of Solomon remains a foundational text to certain schools of magic. The history of the Trojan civilization centers around the ancient city of Troy, located in present-day Hisarlik, Turkey. The earliest settlements in Troy date back to around 3600 BC, with the city evolving into a small fortified urban center by 3000 BC. Troy's history is marked by a series of destructions and rebuildings, resulting in 9 archaeological layers, each representing different phases of its habitation. The Trojans were an Anatolian people with close cultural ties to other people inhabiting the region. Their strategic location near the Dardanelles Strait made Troy a significant trade and military hub. During the Late Bronze Age, Troy, known as Wilusa in Hittite texts, was a vassal state of the Hittite Empire suggesting it was an influential city-state involved in regional politics. The most famous aspect of Trojan history is the Trojan War, a legendary conflict between the Achaean Greeks and the city of Troy. According to Greek mythology, the war was sparked by Paris of Troy abducting Helen, wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta. This event is immortalized in Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, although the historicity of the war remains debated among scholars. The war is traditionally dated to the 12th or 13th century BC, with many believing it represents a series of conflicts rather than a single event. Archaeological evidence supports the existence of a significant settlement at Hisarlik, with layers indicating destructions that align with the timeline of the Trojan War. Troy 7 in particular shows signs of a violent end, possibly correlating with the war described by Homer. This layer, dated to around the 12th century BC, reveals a city that was well fortified and densely populated, fitting the profile of the besieged Troy. The downfall of Troy marked the end of its prominence in the region. Post-destruction, the site saw periods of reoccupation during Greek and Roman times. However, the inhabitants were Greeks rather than Trojans. Modern excavations, beginning with Heinrich Schliemann in the 19th century, have brought to light many details about its extensive history. However, the exact relationship between myth and reality continues to be a subject of scholarly investigation and mystery. Also, if you're interested in historical content, be sure to check out my second channel, Lazy Chill History. You can find a link to the channel on my channel page. Just click my profile and check it out, and don't forget to subscribe there. If you liked this video, please do me a huge favor and click like and subscribe, and also click the share button and send it to anyone who you think may enjoy it. Also be sure to check out my other Iceberg videos on my channel page. I've got videos covering a variety of topics, from conspiracies to urban legends to spookier stuff for the season such as demonology. Shout out to my patrons Iced Mocha, Kurt the Squirt, Monoxide Wendigo, Jeffer Metcalf, Z-Volts, Courtney Hammett, Out of Gray's Mind, Cap, Dionysus, Silba Rose, Franz Tech, Unknown Delusions, Faye, Jack Russell, Boomslang, Spookiest Becky, Vespertine, Meta Nova, Will Rowan, Crab Nebula, and Blasphemoose.